All right, welcome everyone. We're excited to see you today for our mayoral candidate chat with Kim White. And I want to welcome you on behalf of Arts Build and Arts Forward. We've been partnering to do these Arts Vote activities throughout the year, encouraging the arts sector to vote, to educate themselves about the topics and issues, and to advocate for arts funding and arts resources in our area. So, Arts Build's mission is building a stronger community through the arts, and we do that by funding arts organizations, doing arts leadership programs, and then also arts advocacy, which is what we're doing today. I would be remiss if I did not mention that Arts Build is in the midst of our annual campaign, which will end at the end of December. So if you would like to support the work that we do, you can visit us at artsbuild.com and make a pledge or a donation. Um, I, I was about to turn it over to my good friend Monica Kinsey, but she disappeared. No, there she is. So I want to take this time to first thank Monica and Arts Forward for working with us on this effort and for all the work that she's put into these candidate chats. So I'm going to turn it over to her and she's going to take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'm back. I had to do a quick run to shut my door, so I apologize. Thank you to everyone for coming and joining us this morning, or I should say afternoon, for this Lunch and Learn with our next candidate, Kim White. Kim White, as you may know, is a Chattanoogan who was formerly the president of the River City Company and has now tossed her hat in the ring to become our next mayor in 2021. Also, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Ms. Ann Rushing from the Sculpture Fields, is here to follow through with all the questions that the audience has submitted. And we are just so thankful to have both of you here and ready to kick this off. Ann, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Well, I'm excited to be here today representing the sort of the arts community, because I know there's a lot of us from different backgrounds. So I know Kim White a little bit through her work in the community and her friendship with my mother, especially. So, you know, and so I've gotten to know you personally, and I'm excited now to know a little bit more about what your plans are as mayor. For those of you who don't know, Kim is a homegrown leader in our community, Hickson High School, UTC grad, and was an art major studying under Jim Collins and Alan White when she was at UTC. So I provide a little bit background, but Kim, tell me more about your background and experience in the arts.
Super, thank you, and it's great to be here. Thank you all for the opportunity. So, yeah, and I think I've spent my whole life trying to explain about my being an art major, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I grew up in a family that was creative. I was very shy growing up, and art was a way that it really helped me find my voice. So I took drawing and painting classes and learned to play the piano, and then went to UTC, starting off in communications, and then really felt drawn to art. I did on the side, I drew logos and did all kinds of things like that to help pay my way through school. So ended up graduating with the art degree. When I graduated, my first job was really doing some marketing and logos and things like that for some companies. But through River City Company, I have really had an opportunity to do a lot in the arts community. Just about everything that we've done has an art component in it. So whether it's in the built environment, or it's things like wrapping car to buses, or whether it's wrapping the electric panels downtown, we've had an influence in really trying to bring art in different ways throughout the community. But personally, I got very involved with AVA. I served on the board there for many years, got involved in the Four Bridges Arts Festival. So I've raised money for the arts, and I've also been involved in a lot of strategic planning. So it really has been, I think, because it's been such a big component in my life, has been something that I've been drawn to since I've been back in Chattanooga.
Thank you so much. It is, I mean, you already get it, so we're preaching to the choir here. I wanted to ask a little bit more with your work with River City. One thing that I personally noticed is how really River City reached out to the community when they were installing, say, new art pieces or public art. So what was the decision-making process that said, we're not going to tell people what we're putting in, we're going to involve the community in creating that?
I think one of the most wonderful things about our community is that we are, and we've stayed authentic. And that is because we have listened to voices. And when you walk through the community and you see the built environment or you see the sculptures, it does tell a wonderful story. We just don't plop down a piece of artwork in the city. I think we're very intentional about all of that. And so I think making sure that what we do tells a story of the community. I mean, you have to involve the community in that piece of it.
Also, and this is a submitted question, but I think it ties into this a little bit, is so your work with River City obviously had a very specific footprint and a very specific goal. And in the rest of Chattanooga, a big issue right now is gentrification, and it's affecting lower income folk, and especially the Black and people of color people in the community in devastating ways. So how would you ensure that individual cultures are preserved, like especially the culture of the Black community or the Latinx community?
So I think it is from going out and listening to those voices. I believe that leadership in this way is bottom up. It's not top down from government. So it really is listening to the community, making sure their voices are heard. We have a great history of that in our city about trying to make sure the community is heard. I think that we've had some hits, we've had some misses, but we can learn from all of those. But there, as I've been out, running for mayor, as you said, Ann, my footprint for River City has been downtown. And it's been a wonderful experience after leaving River City to go out into the neighborhoods to hear more unique voices and hear the opportunities and the possibilities in each community. So I see we do the same process by bringing the community together and making sure whatever happens in their community has their voice in it.
And so that ties into what role, if any, does local government have to play in the arts and culture of our city?
Well, I think that, like I said before, I think that arts and culture is a part of who we are, and it helps us tell our story. So I'm very supportive of making sure that we are intentionally involved in it. I see the government's role is really partnering with organizations like Arts Build and others to see how we can empower them to do great work. How can we, I know Mayor Burke has done some really cool things in the last few years looking at the strategic plan. I think it's taking the strategic plan that was just done and seeing how we can bring some of that into implementation, whether it's hiring local artists, if we have strategists that come out and work in the neighborhoods. I think it's ways to make sure that, one, we empower other nonprofits, but we do have a role in it to making sure that whatever we do, whether it's programming parks, whether it's music, because I think sometimes when people think about art, they think about, we have a lot of wonderful sculptures and that's what they think about, but really we have a great music scene. We have things that we can do in our public spaces to bring all types of diversity to the community, and government should be involved in that.
And so how, kind of more specifically, do you see your administration helping individual artists in our community or in these communities to thrive?
So I would say really trying to shore up. Right now there's a public art, it's like a person and a half, trying to look at how we think about arts, culture, and open spaces. What do we call it? Arts, culture, public realm. Bringing more resources there so we can put people out into the neighborhoods. And I would say that we would work a lot with existing nonprofits that have those relationships to see how we can all partner together to do that.
Also, this is a little bit off, but I know that you grew up in Chattanooga, but you left for a time and came back. So I'm interested in how that affected your view of Chattanooga, especially the arts and culture scene, but in general, and how it affects what you see going forward for the city. The changes Chattanooga's gone through. It's no longer the Dynamo of Dixie, it's the scenic city. So how do you plan to either continue this trajectory of change, or what do you think you might do differently?
So, I mean, it definitely changed a lot from when I was in town and when I came back, and it was a very eye-opening experience. I think you realize sometimes it takes leaving before you realize how beautiful and special places are. And it's made me appreciate Chattanooga in a much different way. I think just even traveling to different cities, you realize again what's special about Chattanooga, and making sure that what we do, we protect that. We add to it, but we also protect that. And I think we do that by making sure what we do is authentic, that it's done with a planning lens in mind. And we think about it as we put art in everything. I mean, I look at even a development that River City did, the block, the climbing gym with that beautiful wall outside. I mean, to me, that's a work of art that really talks about who we are as a city with the outdoors. So it's like thinking about what we can do with elements. The First Street Steps is being redone right now. And that was a process started before I left River City, but that's another way that we intentionally integrated art into the built environment. So maybe visitors, when they come here, don't think about, it's a piece of art, but they enjoy it in a different way because it was intentionally done with art in the design.
And so from that kind of makes talking about integration of the art with everything, and going back to a previous question, we talked a bit about like preserving the culture of the Black or Latinx community. What do you think the city can do to help integrate that culture and that art into the larger community?
I think it is creating awareness, doing things that is authentic to that community. I know, again, right before I left at River City Company, we were involved in Miller Park. And one of the things that we took on was making sure that some of the programming had a lot more diversity in it, that we actually brought it from the neighborhoods and into the wide public realm to give people more access and exposure to that. I think we ought to do that in a bigger way. We look at all the riverfront property and the festivals and things that we have. I think that we have a great opportunity to really partner with those different communities to do some things that, again, shines a light on them.
And with that, Chattanooga, is known for its art community, and artists are problem solvers. So would you be open to engaging artists in complex problem solving, such as issues with juvenile delinquency, homelessness, or violent crime?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the, we laughed about me having an art degree, but I have loved having a liberal arts background and seeing things with a different lens. I think it does help. It's helped me problem solve, that everything's not linear, that you get a lot of different voices and a lot of different ways of looking at things. And having artists at the table, I just think it's absolutely would be a win. So artists aren't just about painting and drawing. It is about looking at things through a different lens, and bringing that to work in the city, I think would be very helpful.
Can you think of any, I mean, this is putting you on the spot, but anything specifically or any specific examples where you've sort of seen that collaboration work?
Well, I would say, like any big challenge that we've had in the city, we've had diverse voices, maybe not so intentionally about the arts community. I think some of the work going on right now on the West Side and thinking about what happens in that community, how we get the community engaged and involved, has been helpful to have some of the art community there. I think Patton Porch, that was done in front of Patton Towers, getting the arts community there, thinking about problems about how we think about the public realm and making things more accessible and more attractive to the entire community. I think that's been helpful. So I think really the sky's the limit on getting them involved. It's just, we need to be intentional about doing so.
And tying into that, talking about accessibility, if you are elected mayor, will you support the Mayor's Council on Disability in efforts to facilitate inclusion and awareness through engagement within City Hall departments and the disabled citizens?
Yes, that was an easy one. Yes. Yes, I would.
And to you, what does that engagement look like in that raising awareness? What is kind of more specifically how you see that working?
Well, I think one of the things that, again, I've been doing for the past 90 days has been out in the community and listening to stakeholders, and that's more community oriented. We would do the same thing with all different types of groups. So I think whether it looks where we're talking about transportation or what types of accessibility. I think it's trying to figure out what the problems are, and then how we get those groups engaged. But I think it is sitting down at the table with a wide group of people to look at some of the challenges.
So it sounds like a lot of your kind of some of your ideas are just getting people together and listening to them in the early stages of, or maybe during your campaign to implement these plans during your term. Are there any things, not just related to the arts, but, you know, in general, is there a clear plan that you have for certain issues that you've seen in the city? Is there something that's your cornerstone thing?
Sure. So I think my style is collaboration. And it is partnerships. And that is one thing I see missing right now in our city, is that we have a lot of silos. And I have learned that if you get people that love our city together, we can solve just about any problem. We've proven it for the past 35 years. So partnerships and collaboration is going to be a cornerstone of my administration. We've rolled out a public policy already on job recruitment and what we can do with workforce development, and a focus on small businesses. Artists are small businesses too, and having an office of small business support we think is critical. I think COVID has shined a light on it too, about how these are the backbones, the small businesses are the backbone of our city, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to support those. So much effort is spent on some of the large businesses, but some of the authenticity about Chattanooga are the small homegrown ones. So I think focus on job creation, job recruitment, small business support is something that we're very focused on, and learning how we can do more with homegrown local businesses, again, which are artists too.
So in that, with the artists being, you know, local businesses, and you may not have even considered this yet, would there be some specialized support within your small business support that, you know, every business is different, but an arts business is its own thing because so many are independently run and you're just a one-man show. So have you thought about having specific support within that for the arts?
You know, I haven't, Ann. I think what we envision is looking at what all is out there and seeing where those gaps are and how the administration can really fill some of those, or what partners we need to bring together. Again, right now there are several different groups working in that space, but it seems to be siloed instead of an overall vision. So if you're a small business, where do you actually go for support? Who do you call? I think some of the CARES funding was an example of that. We get funding and then people can't figure out how to give it out because there wasn't a plan. So having that connector in the mayor's office, to me, is the biggest thing, maybe more so than being specified toward a certain type of business. I think they all had the similar challenges.
So with, you know, breaking up these silos and actually making it so it's more of a network, how do you see that process working, and what sort of timeline do you think that will take?
Well, within the first 90 days, we're going to go through the organization of city government and look at what's there. We want to bring partners that are involved in that space. The good news is that I've been in that space for the past 11 years in my role at River City, so it's not something I have to relearn who's in the space. It's just trying to bring everybody around the table. So I would say within the first 90 days, we would have a clear rollout of how city government we would reorganize.
And well, with that reorganization, what steps will you take to make the bidding process for city government opportunities more accessible to local individual artists and local arts organizations?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we can do is make sure that people are aware and they're equipped and they understand the process. I also think the process right now is so complicated. Some people may not want to be involved. So I think it's how do we streamline processes and actually get out and be proactive in making sure people are aware of the opportunities. But the processes right now are it's a very long, laborious process. So I think it does turn a lot of local small businesses off.
And so with spreading that information, how do you think you'll go? I mean, obviously it's going to be something you figure out, but what will be the best way, especially connecting with say, individuals at a smaller level and these smaller organizations and nonprofits? How will
Yes.
you reach?
So I think in talking about the artists in general, that Office of Small Business Support is where that would start, is actually getting information out into the neighborhoods. We have 15 YFD centers that, in my opinion, are very underutilized. And not only could we bring more art programming and some programming in general to the neighborhoods, but that's where we could also do some things with workforce development and having fairs and seminars and letting people understand the process. So I think looking at the city's underutilized assets, whether it's just YFD or more than that, they're scattered throughout our community. So the space is there. It's just we need to get out to them and not expect people to come to City Hall to learn about it.
And on the YFD centers, so how would you maybe promote a more arts and cultural involvement at the YFD centers? And how do you see using them under your administration? Well,
they are prime spots of real estate located in the heart of the community. And I think being open longer hours and on weekends is one. I think that's a great opportunity to have an artist in residence that goes from community to community. I think it is, again, sitting down in the neighborhood and saying, what would you all like to see? What are the gaps? And I think it's working with the Hamilton County schools, is to see how we can actually partner on programming to help support educational opportunities. So I think they're great opportunities for the city to take advantage of and bring a lot more resources out into the community.
And so would you see this as creating a plan that says each YFD center needs to do this and this and this, or that it would be more catered to the individual communities?
I think it's both. I think there's some programming, especially when you talk about schools and mentoring opportunities. So some programs that can be done across the board, but I think each community, how they use the YFDs, how they would like to use the YFDs, I think that's separate. I don't think there's a cookie cutter approach because neighborhoods are all so different. So overall, there's probably some programming that would stay the same, but I think it is working with the neighborhoods to see how can we get them utilized better and more often.
And with that, talking about partnerships with Hamilton County schools, obviously education and arts education are, very, very important to us. So, the schools are the county schools, we know that, but what do you see as the city's roles in promoting education and also promoting arts education?
Well, I mean, education in general, I mean, the kids are at schools 20% of the time. The rest of the time they're out. I mean, so even though we're not in the school business, we definitely are in the education business. And again, I'm going to go back to the YFD centers and say that I think that is our opportunity. That's one of the major opportunities. Another opportunity is what can we do for transportation? And what I've seen and heard is that, there's a lot of programming that kids could take advantage of if there was a way to get them there. So looking at what the city's role in how we could help fill that gap is a big one. So that's education in general. And other than doing some things in the YFD centers right now, and I don't have anything specifically that we could do with arts education, I think there's such a big gap in what we can do in education in general. That's where we would start.
And so this is just another submitted question, but what age do you think a child should start, getting an arts education, or I would say even being involved in the arts? I know my answer, but what do you see arts education like for a child in Chattanooga, what it should look like?
Well, that can start as early as being a baby and looking at colors and shapes and forms. And so, I think that's just part of an upbringing of a child. That's part of integrating it into the education of a child. So I don't think there's if there's not an answer that says too early.
And what do you think for you? I mean, this is just your personal opinion, that an arts education, sort of a well-rounded arts education that's integrated, would look like for young people?
We talk a lot about STEM, and I think we need to talk about STEAM. Is how to put art in just about everything. So integrated art education, I'd love to see art in every school. I'd love to see an art opportunity in every school. I had it when I was in high school, and it was important. Maybe it's summer programs, but I think that we ought to look for ways that kids can express creativity. And especially knowing that some kids do have issues trying to find their voice, or they need confidence, and having a way to express that, whether it's through music or it's through art or creating sculptures, I think that that's a positive for all of our kids.
And so when these kids who hopefully have this amazing art education, grow up and become artists and leaders in our community, especially with our BIPOC members of the community, how do we ensure that Black public art, Latinx public art, and other minority groups are represented and considered, and when we are putting new public art opportunities out there?
I think a lot of that is through partnerships. Right now, when we do some things through the city, there's some pretty specific purchasing guidelines and what we have to go through when we do RFPs. I know that the partnership that we have with the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, this year it focused on women, and the next one will be focused on Black artists. I think ways that we can do that is, and looking at ways that we can partner with that are the best opportunities. But if we actually can go out and make a process easier for artists to actually submit, and we make sure that the whole community understands the opportunity to try to work with the city, that is probably the biggest role.
So, what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is on some of these areas, you say, I'm not the expert on this yet, but there are these groups that are, and I'm going to let them head that up since I'm not the expert.
And talk to them about it, right? So I know that Artsville's been involved in it for a long time. AVA, the foundations have been big partners, is to say, what is the city's role? Where can we help fill a need or lift up the arts that's not occurring now? I think we're very fortunate that we do have a very vibrant arts community, better than any I've ever been in. But there's more that still needs to be done and should be done, because we are a growing city and we're really proud of that part of our community.
And I started listening and forgot my next question. So this ties in with, since it is such a part of our community, and I think a big issue pre-COVID was sort of how the city works with its music scene and its nightlife. That's been a constant, I think, struggle, especially downtown, or as apartments come up and music venues open. So how do you see walking that tightrope, and what sort of ordinances or changes do you see happening at the city level?
Well, I think that we need to do all we can to encourage more nightlife and more activity on the street. There's some things that the city could do ordinance-wise just to make it easier to put tables on the sidewalk in front of restaurants. I've been very surprised during COVID that you see other cities that have been very creative about working with local businesses about how you actually do that and how you bring art and music out into the streets, because there's not as many people or cars at that time. So I think that we need to look at what we can do with open container laws. When you live downtown, you get noise. I know that because I live downtown, and you get fire trucks and you get music, but there are noise ordinances, and I think it's just making sure that we all work to be good neighbors. But there's always going to be that tension. But people that come downtown know they're not moving to the country, and it's just trying to strike that balance, and that's sometimes it's project by project, or just working with the bad players and make sure they understand what the expectation is. But having a very vibrant, active music and outdoor and dining scene does nothing but positive things for our city.
So how do you see that and the art sector in general being leveraged to spur economic growth?
Well, I think that the arts have already spurred economic growth. I think we need to tell that story better because a lot of companies have come here because of the arts and culture and quality of life. And that's, I mean, that's how you recruit companies here. That's why Volkswagen came. That's why Austin came, because of the Riverwalk and everything that was happening around there. So I think the city's role is we need to tell a better story and make it not so controversial when money is spent on art, and try to make sure people understand that it is an economic driver and an important piece of our community. It's what makes us, one of the things that makes us Chattanooga.
I'm getting into the, you've gone through these amazingly. So I'm hitting the end of my questions. So some of these are a little bit repeats, but this is a little bit different but it ties in together. The city is currently working towards the design phase for a very new modern regional skate park. So what are your thoughts on this project, and how do you think you would approach funding parks and recreation? And, this ties in, it can be an art space, a graffiti space, there's things that can go into it. So what would your approach to funding these sorts of things be in general? And what do you think of this project specifically?
I don't know enough about the project specifically to talk through it. The skate park has been very popular. In fact, I wish we had more skate parks so people would quit skating on our parks in public spaces. But I will talk about parks and rec specifically. My plan is to have a reconstituted parks department and a much more vibrant, active parks department. I think that we've really missed the opportunity, especially during COVID. We have beautiful outdoor space that no one uses except for big events. And so while we've had big events, we've had a great opportunity to invite the public to come down and take advantage of it. So I think that we do need to have a lot more activity, a lot more programming, and whether the city does it or whether we partner with someone else to do it. I tend to think the city is not the best at programming, but I do think that we need to be very intentional and utilize these wonderful assets and make sure that we used to have a world-renowned parks department, but and making sure that it does, we attract all Chattanoogans to it, to understand how beautiful our city is and take advantage of it.
So it sounds like a lot of this is that Chattanooga has these resources and they're not being utilized, or it's not being communicated that they're available for everyone. So how do you see that communication of, hey, it's here? I mean, do you see it as a marketing campaign, or, through the YF, what specifically do you see to make sure people know this is your city, this is what, come use it?
Well, I think it's at River City, but again, before I left, we were working on a riverfront plan, which they still are, and it was going out to the neighborhoods and talking about the riverfront and talking about how close it is, and maybe it's field trips, and maybe it's scavenger hunts, and maybe it's diverse programming that actually gets people that want to come be part of it. I think that's been a big piece of it. People say, well, there's nothing down there for me. So I think it's just a mixture of things, but I don't think we can just put up a billboard and say, come on down, it's great down here. I think it's actually getting out there and talking through it and showing them and bringing them out, and maybe we have a great Chattanooga activity to get more people out. I know that, in the 80s, when our city, no one came downtown, the way we got people downtown first was programming. It was through 3 concerts, and it was giving people a reason to think about the city differently. And I think in a way we're at that point again, is that the programming needs to look different, but we need to say, come on down and take advantage of this beautiful, beautiful city.
And that kind of ties into, I mean, COVID has affected everything, but the nature of a lot of these events that started in the 80s, they've changed. Like the Bessie Smith Strut has gone away. Riverbend has gone away now, at least temporarily, maybe permanently. So do you see this as something the city needs to restart or find new ways of implementing these programs? Or do you think that's the responsibility of, say, individual industry and companies within the community?
I would say that we need to partner with individual companies in the community, whether we actually fund it or we have a couple of signature events that we're involved in, not the city putting on events unless it's, the 4th of July, and it would be great if we had a Christmas parade. But I think we all have to see what events look like coming out of COVID. The advantage that we do have is that we have acres and acres of property on the riverfront that we can think through this and do it in a safe way. So I think it is getting people that are in that realm, that do programming and do music, and let's think through what would it look like. I don't think we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people come down for concerts anytime soon, but there are people that are great at putting on events. Let's just kind of see what it looks like coming out of COVID and know that we have assets to take advantage of.
And so do you think in some ways this year's kind of been a reset for some of the things that have just been going on, not in a bad way, but they've just been running the same way for years and years and years, and COVID made everything stop. So, I mean, there are benefits and drawbacks. Do you think it's been bad or been good or somewhere in between that we've had this reset?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's bad that we had it, but I will say some good will come out of it. I've already seen good come out of it. People thinking through how we do business differently. I don't think anybody's going to complain about drive-up margaritas or take-out margaritas. I mean, what we've done in the restaurant business, just rethinking all of that. Again, I think we've lost. We could have done even more with outdoor dining and public space and how that's utilized. While no one's been downtown, but I think that we'll come out of it better. I think we're in better shape than almost any community coming out of this. One, we do have the creativity, we have the know-how. We're a city that is one that we are connected and networked, and we work together, and we've proven that. So I think we have a great opportunity coming out of COVID even better than we did before.
And with this, transition that everywhere the world is going through, but Chattanooga as well, coming out of COVID, and just the transition Chattanooga's in general, a lot of what has been improvements in Chattanooga over the past 100 years even has come from several families and foundations. The city hasn't necessarily had to fix potholes. Maybe there would be a foundation that would do it. The arts and culture, a lot of it has been spurred by these families who could afford to do it. So the city didn't have to, but now that's changing. The kids are grown up and moved away. The foundation is changing its focus. So how do you see the city stepping in to take over for things that it didn't have to be responsible for before, and ensuring, that we still have great success in the arts or in filling potholes or building a new building?
Well, I will say the city should be filling potholes. All right, no one but the city should be filling potholes. And I think it is the city coming out of COVID. I mean, we're going to have budget constraints, a big budget constraints. So I think it is we've got to realign our priorities and what is the city's role. And I see the city's role in we need to recruit jobs and recruit new investments so we do have the funds to do some of these other things. We need to make sure that we have great infrastructure. We need to make sure that we are a city that's easy to do business with so we can attract development and investment and have people want to come here and do some things. I think it is, so we've got to get back and do some of the basics well. Some of that is making sure our city's beautiful. We pick up trash. The gateways look good to our city. I'm embarrassed about how coming into our city, what the gateways look like, whether it's a state's issue or our issue, it's our city. And we need to figure out how to make sure that we are a beautiful, welcoming city so we can get more investment. I think that we're lucky that we have a very strong, it's not like years ago when we had nothing and we were starting from scratch. I'm not saying we don't need foundations, because we do, and we are so fortunate. But we're in a much better place that we have some organizations. Arts Build is one of those. The Tivoli Foundation that was put in place. We have some good pieces, so it's not we need to keep looking for new investment and new people that want to get involved and not just rely on a handful of families. And I think we've done a good job with that. We've attracted people from all over the country that have come to Chattanooga, and they're getting involved in boards, and they're getting involved in different projects in the city and lending their voice. So I think the city needs to make sure we're the best of the best. And then it's easier to attract new investment and energy around some of these other projects.
Do you have any specific plans, which I know it's subject to change, but right now that you think will help attract some more of these, some more investment in more small businesses or even large businesses to Chattanooga?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a focus. I think it is. I think as mayor, I should be the #1 cheerleader. I think anybody that knows me knows I've been the #1 cheerleader for just about anything I've been involved in. But it's working with the chamber as a sales arm, but it is a focus on job recruitment. And I think we've done a lot with scattershot and not with a lot of focus. So I think there is an opportunity to do that just with the Office of Small Business Support, having some people in the city that actually help the chamber with some of those roles. And I think it is going out to say, Chattanooga is a great place to live. I'm sure everybody on this call knows people that have moved here just because of it's Chattanooga. We can do the same thing with companies that want to get out of the big city and can work remotely and do things remotely. So I think we're in a prime spot. We've just got to get our resources realigned and say this is a priority, that we've got to have new investment in the city.
And so with the additional, the programs you want to start that are run by the city, do you see right now arts, there's public art and there seems to be a lot that comes out of economic development. Do you see there being something that's a more specific part of city government than public art that would be arts in general? Or do you think, Arts Build has that covered? We don't need to get into that as much, just work with them.
No, I think I would love it. I mean, I told James when the conversation started, I want to sit down and just talk with him about, what does that look like? But I think right now, anybody would say that's dealt with public art, they have a lot pulling on them, especially as we look like in the build environment, how to put art in pieces of that. So whether it's back to arts and culture, whether again, like I said, arts, culture, open space, I think we've got to figure out if arts does help Chattanooga's brand and help us tell our story, what do we need to be doing in the city in conjunction with organizations like Arts Build? The city needs to have control over some of that and support some of that because a lot of the art is in the public realm. But Arts Build has a role along with some other arts organizations. But I think that we need to shore up what we do right now in the arts.
And then before we finish up, my last question is, what has been during the pandemic, arts-wise, kind of getting you through, and what's been your, artistic salve in this crazy time?
Well, I love our city, and I feel so fortunate that we have a beautiful, walkable city. And so my favorite part in the way I begin my day is walking through our city with my dog walking me through our city, and walking by all the beautiful sculptures. I mean, now even the vinyl boxes that River City did, the electrical boxes. I mean, we have art and beauty everywhere in our city. So it is getting outside and really enjoying the natural assets.
And I think that I've really gone through all my questions, but that gives us a little bit more time for some Q&A. So thank you so much, Kim, for letting me talk to you and ask all these questions. And I will hand it over to Monica.
Hey, Ann, thank you so much. And I wish we were like together in person instead of in a box, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ann. You did a great job. Thank you for participating. We really appreciate you. So we have a few questions that have come in various ways that I'll go over. Let's see here. First is Mayor Burke restructured city departments when he assumed office. Will you keep this structure or change it?
I think that I'm going to go in with a different lens and just look. I'm going to do a total evaluation and see what's working, what's not. And I think we have a lot of silos right now. I would say I'm going to look at how we can streamline processes and get things through city government a little bit easier.
Okay. This is similar in the sense of what are your thoughts about the current BFO budgets for outcome process? Is this something that you would keep, eliminate, replace with something else? Let's see. How would you restructure the BFOs if you kept that process to make the funds more attainable for the nonprofits serving our community?
I'm not a fan of the BFO process. I know that people that have been through it know how laborious it is, and especially for essential services, I don't see that the BFO process at all. Whether we totally do away with it, that's my inclination today, is that we look at a different process, and I guess more to come on that.
Okay. Okay, next question is, you have been speaking a lot about growing and supporting business. As a small business owner, I'm interested in hearing your specific ideas on how you plan to support small local business, particularly in the wake of the pandemic.
Well, I think it is making sure that we've identified resources that we can bring to the table. Whether we end up, like an example was, like the CARES Act money that came in, and it was at the last minute trying to figure out how to get rid of that. I think that we could have done a lot more to support small local restaurants and some of those operations during the pandemic, with making things a lot more flexible. Instead of having a fee to do everything and go through a long process, we needed to be a lot more nimble. So I think it is having open dialogue with small businesses, trying to figure out what are things the city could do quickly to make some of those pivots. So I think the process takes so long. Normally we would be through a normal pandemic before anything would come out of the city, and that's just how city governments work. I'm excited about the opportunity to come in with a business lens and say, how do we streamline and get rid of some of the obstacles?
Mm-hmm. Okay, to that point, I have another question. It's kind of a little bit of a follow-up. With your experience at River City Development and the role of the mayor, how would you recruit and make it more attainable to get businesses and art installations into our empty downtown buildings?
That's really, that is partnerships. River City had a program years ago called Open Spaces that we went out and recruited artists. It was art and tech to put lighting in empty buildings. So I think that's just execution. I think it's identifying willing and able partners. So I don't think that that's difficult. It's just setting a priority on doing it.
Okay, great. To the earlier question about in regards to accessibility of disabled citizens, can you elaborate on your actual engagement of disabled citizens in the arts and policies to facilitate inclusion?
Well, that's a mouthful right there. My specific ways of doing that so far, I haven't. But what I said was I would plan on having that voice at the table.
Okay. If you're voted in as mayor, how will you engage your local arts community and local promoters versus outside entities that we have activating our city-owned venues and riverfront to keep those dollars and jobs in our city? How can these assets be more accessible?
So I think it is coming back with an overall plan. There's not an overall plan of what we do with our open spaces. It's kind of, in my opinion, a free-for-all. Whoever wants to do an event, you come down. I think that the city needs to tell a story, and we need to figure out what we want, what type of events we want, and we really need to be intentional about that. So I think it is coming out with a plan about what we're going to do to activate open spaces. Okay,
perfect. 3 more questions thus far. It seems that as more public art moves in, gentrification accompanies, and many homeowners and renters are no longer able to afford their own homes. Could you speak to this issue?
Well, I wouldn't equate public art with gentrification. I think gentrification is an issue, and we ought to bring public art and things like that in the neighborhoods. We also ought to want to bring investment into our neighborhoods. So part of the issue is it's displacement more than anything. You want investment in neighborhoods. So it's my administration will be looking at city-owned parcels in the neighborhoods and seeing what we can do to keep affordability as a key component of it. Affordable housing is a big piece of it. I think we look at rules and regs on how we get different types of zoning and housing in some of these neighborhoods to make it more affordable. So again, I think having art and investment is fabulous for every neighborhood. Every neighborhood should want it. And that does not automatically, it's not gentrification. I think we need to work on the displacement piece.
Okay. Let's see. As a city creator, I'm concerned that the funding for public art Chattanooga will be severely cut due to the loss of revenue from the impact of COVID. If you are elected as mayor, will you have plans to keep as much funding channeled into public art Chattanooga as possible? And what possible collaborations will you implement?
So I know right now the way it was set up, 2% of all capital, above ground capital projects goes into public art. And I think that's great. And if we can keep it, I definitely would want to keep it. I think it's very, very important. This is the first time we've really had a funding mechanism since Corker was mayor. And he did something very similar. So yes, I would look to make sure that we could fund public art. And I can't say today what that percentage will be because we are going to have budget constraints. But I think that's the time that we really need to use and work with our foundations and philanthropic partners to help us fill those type gaps, not pothole gaps. And look, but I think that we need to make a commitment, and I would make a commitment to having public art as a part of city government. And in order to do so, they have to have funding.
Right. Okay, 2 more questions. I told a lie when I said there were only 3 left. I apologize. What is your vision for Chattanooga, and does your campaign priorities? What is your vision for Chattanooga, and how do your campaign priorities support that vision?
My vision is that we bring opportunity out in every single neighborhood. It's for all Chattanoogans, it's for all neighborhoods. And so my campaign has been out into the neighborhoods, listening to the voices as we develop policies. And it is bringing opportunity out to the people. And it's just from job creation. It's from making sure that we have a city that's run well. It's from looking at the assets that we have and how we can actually provide more resources through YFD centers or whatever those may be. It's looking at affordable housing and making sure that people have an opportunity that they can live in a safe, clean environment. So I think when you look at opportunity, every neighborhood, it may be a little different. But I think what I've been so encouraged by is, one, the love people have for our city and how much hope. They just want to hear their voices in the mix. And I don't care if I've been in Alton Park or Lookout Valley, there's a lot of people that don't feel like their voice has been heard. And so I think having a very accessible government, which I plan to do, I've been that way in my career at River City Company, making sure that we're listening and we're attentive, that the plans don't come from the top, they come from community up, is how we make change in our city.
Okay, great. And lastly, why should the people who make up the local arts and culture sector vote for you?
All right. Well, I'm an art major. I bet that I'm the only candidate that was an art major. In fact, my whole life, my whole career has been involved in some way supporting the arts. I get it. I understand it. I understand that it's not just sculptures or it's not just painting. It's really, our city is a work of art. And how we can incorporate that and tell Chattanooga's story, utilizing our local artists, is one of the greatest assets. And I'm committed to do that. I've done that for the past 11 years at River City Company, and before that by supporting the arts and art organizations in my other jobs. So I have a history and the proof, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Kim. Thank you for taking the time today. We really appreciate you. And that is all of the questions that we've had submitted thus far. So I'm going to turn it over to James.
All right. And I just want to thank you again, Kim, too, for visiting and sharing with us today. I also want to thank Ann. Do you have anything you want to promote that's happening at Sculpture Fields before we end?
Well, right now we don't have a lot going on, but I will say we are open to the public, sun up to sundown every day. You can bring your dog, you can bring a picnic. Don't bring alcohol, that's not allowed. They'll come after you. But and so yeah, it's a great way to enjoy public art and just get outside and relax in this crazy, stressful time.
Thank you. It's one of the great spaces and places in our city. And I want to thank Monica too for her coordination and participation in this, along with Arts Building Arts Forward. So that's it. We want to make sure that you join us next Wednesday when we will be talking to mayoral candidate Wade Hinton. And we will see you then. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you, James.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Bye.